So in today's video, I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about the pros and cons of pharmacy.
Ready to order?
Can I get my normal order? Fuck that bit. No noodles. Can I get rice on the side too? I've been actually 5 years out of pharmacy. I think I would have a very unique take compared to other people who have done these type of videos. So I have 4 pros and 4 cons. I wrote this all on my iPhone the other day. Thank you. Show you BTS behind the scenes. This is definitely not keto right here. Thank you. And you gotta get this too. Super solid. 1 scoop, 2 scoop. And if you don't know what this is, I think it's like the fatty broth. It just adds such a depth of flavor and stuff. I don't know how to say it in Viet because your boy is Chinese. Anyways, you're probably wondering, why am I shooting a vlog at a random pho restaurant on a weekend? It's kind of more casual like days of like my YouTube channel back in the day. I'm not gonna lie, I still get quite nervous filming in public. Try not to be loud and obnoxious, so incognito Kevin is like out. I'm not like the ratchet 2017 Kevin back in the day. Quick taste. Freaking delicious. Anyways, let's get on to the pros and cons of this video while I eat this delicious pho. Let's talk about number 1, career opportunities, including remote opportunities. One of the things I always heard about in pharmacy growing up was that, once you're stuck in community pharmacy, you're stuck there forever. And I can safely say this is not true. A bunch of my friends who started out in community pharmacy like myself, we're about 10 years out now. One of my friends works for IHS as a clinical pharmacist. Another one of my friends works inpatient now. A bunch of my friends work for managed care, prior authorization. Even one of my friends actually started up her own pharmacy too, which I probably wouldn't recommend just because the profit margins are so low. But it's really not true about all like this thing that you're stuck in retail pharmacy for the rest of your life. As I talk to more of my friends, more and more positions are becoming remote. So you have remote verification in different like states that are really remote. A lot of the PA positions are also remote, especially with telepharmacy getting a lot bigger. There's more and more roles to do remote work, and you don't have to be stuck in a retail pharmacy for 12 hours a day. Now, the question is there a lot of demand for these jobs? I don't really know. It's hard to say. I wouldn't know how to quantify it. But it's kind of cool seeing all the remote capability type of things happening these days that didn't exist in my days before too. Yeah, one of my friends was telling me that she works home infusion. She was like working at home all the time, and she just loved it. She loved the quality of life. Not to say that would have changed my path, because I always felt like I was supposed to do entrepreneurship. But, you know, starting business is really hard. Not everybody should start a business. And so sometimes what we're really looking for is that quality of life and just like good work-life balance. So there's that. Let's talk about 2, competitive advantage with our degree. One good thing about pharmacy is that it pairs solid, thank you. One of the cool things about pharmacy is that it pairs really well with other skill sets. So I'm not talking about like degrees. I'm talking about like, because most people think, oh, I'll just do a JD PharmD, I'll do a PA PharmD. I don't know why you would do that. I'll do an MBA PharmD. And that's good if you want like more traditional roles, like corporate roles and all that. But from the perspective of more of the startup world, I still get looks when I tell people, hey, I used to be a pharmacist and I'm still licensed technically. And in the normal world, right, of like the startup and like digital marketing age, so good. It still carries quite a reputation of being like knowledgeable, professional, having this professional presence that most other careers don't have. There's something about the way that we present ourselves that gives people a sense of confidence. Let me boost this up just a bit. It looks a little low center. I feel like we're in date mode right now. I think with this professional presence that we have, along with combining it with a non-related skill set. So like, for example, me, I have a PharmD and I have a copywriting background, or I have a sales or business development background. I have all these different skill sets, right, that I picked up through YouTube and just leaving pharmacy and stuff, like design and copywriting and all these different things, video, YouTube, content production. When you have something like this, you automatically create a unique personal brand that no one else can really compete. Because I don't know too many other pharmacy copywriters who are really, really good that can do that. And so I can imagine getting a role at like Pharmacist Letter or anything with like digital products, professional products. I've actually had inquiries with. Like I actually got reached out by this lab by Stanford, and they needed help with their conversions. Future Kevin here. I think I didn't do a really good job of explaining what I meant by that. They were trying to raise more money on top of the grants, and they actually have a certification that they're trying to sell to Stanford students, Stanford staff, and the public too. So that's what I meant. Now back to the video. And since I have a pharmacist background, I'm technically a doctor, even though I never flex that. It provides a very, very nice like background, like, oh, this guy's educated and he knows these other fields. I'd rather hire this person versus like another person. And so when I did client work, like they were like, Dr. Kevin's our guy. And that's come into so many places, right? Like right now, I'm in the middle of like potentially working with Ali Abdal, doing a lot of his sales arm. I have that consulting gig too. And then also like I've been getting a lot of copywriting gigs too, just because I can speak the language of pharmacy. I can speak the language of digital marketing and high ticket sales in this weird world. And more pharmacists are actually launching high ticket offers, and it puts me in a very unique space because I'm kind of like one of the main figureheads of this, like not the main ones, but like you get the idea. There's very, very few people that are like me, and that's a unique selling proposition, which I think pairs really, really nice with skills. Sometimes I like to take this rice and dip it into a soup. It's so good. Exquisite. I don't even use that word ever. Kind of reminds me of the Future meme that you see, where he goes like, sensational.
Sensational.
Pro number 3, consulting opportunities. Now this is a very unique one, and when we hear consulting, we think getting a 9-to-5 as a pharmacy consultant, and I'm not talking about that. And I'm talking more than just doing MTM. People these days are willing to pay for our expertise. With all this like confusion about health and all that sort of stuff, people are like willing to pay for an industry advisor. And when you say like who would pay for it, it's probably not your local plumber Joe or B2C, that's what we call it, to like the mass public, like customers and stuff. Probably more business owners and entrepreneurs. So for example, one of my friends and one of the people I follow, he runs a male community that is trying to optimize their testosterone levels and hormone levels. And one of the things that they were looking for to add credibility to the program was having a professional like myself go in there and just help people out with their consult on their testosterone. Now, in no way is this like health advice or anything like that, but that's a really, really great example where people are willing to pay for our credibility and our knowledge. I was following somebody else's offer, this YouTuber called Hamza. He has like a pharmacist on board for his offer, and we can charge for like our expertise. And not only does that help their offers, right, with credibility because we went to school for so long, but you know, it could be really, really great side money, or even just getting a retainer, which could pay off your student loans, get you a house or anything like that. For me, I'm not big on like stack out liabilities like that. And especially in the startup world, a lot of times they're looking for industry experts who know a field very, very well. Or like, so not only when you're starting up a company, but when you're running M&A deals, which is mergers and acquisitions, basically buying and selling businesses, a lot of times they'll need to create a board. And you could actually sit on that board and just be an industry expert. I could easily see a pharmacist being, especially with compounding experience, sitting on like a cosmetic beauty board for that sort of stuff. It's great because most pharmacists are female too. So if you're watching this, that's a huge like opportunity. This video doesn't really tell you how to get these opportunities. It's all like networking and making friends in the right places. And I think you're probably smart enough to figure it out, right? But it's just to see this thought of, hey, maybe there's a different life outside the 9 to 5 pharmacy type of stuff too. I have to say, there's no better feeling than pho broth when you're not feeling too like mentally sharp. This always makes me feel like I'm at home. Even though I'm Chinese as Going to pro number 4. Oh, stability. And you're thinking like, oh yeah, the paychecks and all that. We all know that. You make 6 figures and all that sort of stuff. But what I'm talking about stability is like really, really nice. Since leaving pharmacy, I've had to kind of pay for my own health insurance. I don't have a 401k. If I do want a 401k, I have to build it up myself. And while sometimes, in all transparency, I make more than pharmacy, sometimes I make a lot less, or at least initially. And that was a very, very scary thought for me. Even with like the decreased rates in pharmacy and all that, like the pay, the one nice thing about pharmacy that I do kind of miss is like the stability, the consistency, you know? Because it allows you to have some predictability. And when you have some predictability, you can take more risks than other people. I would say I'm not as heavily invested in the market as I used to be back in the day. I used to be hella aggressive because I was like, what's the chance I'm going to lose my pharmacy job or this pharmacy is going to go under? It's something to just think about. A lot of people don't think about like all these other factors that come into play with like, you know, you have to worry about taxes, you have to worry about structuring your business, you have to worry about like your health insurance, 401k, what if I get disabled? And having a nice corporate lifestyle sometimes can really mitigate those things. I'm not saying that I would go back because I value the freedom too much and that's just my personality. But for most people, they're just looking for a better work-life balance. And while I don't regret jumping into the entrepreneur world, I definitely miss all the corporate benefits I used to have. Holy shit. Let's get into 4 cons. So when I was planning these lists for cons, I didn't want to be like my old self where I was like, oh, everything is like so blah, 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 blah. I want to keep it more neutral. These are things I wish I kind of knew. Let's go over con number 1, golden handcuffs. So there's this term that I learned pretty early on in my entrepreneur journey, where I heard this term of golden handcuffs from my consulting friends. The reason why they call it the golden handcuffs is because you're getting paid very, very well. But it's a codependent relationship where you're dependent on the job and what it pays because your liabilities, like school debt, your home, all these different things keep you stuck there. You have more and more responsibilities and it's harder to take like risks of like leaving. And in my opinion, I think it's one of the reasons why the work environment is so poor in pharmacy is because we just stick with things. We deal with the asshole bosses, we deal with the bureaucracy, we deal with the high work demands with little help. Not all of this is like, I would say, corporate pharmacy's fault. There is like the pharmacy industry is a very low profit margin if you don't know. I'll talk more about that later. But even right now, there's this whole walkout at CVS because of the working conditions and they've gotten so bad. And so that's one thing that to just keep in mind is like, you know, it's easy to inflate your lifestyle when you're making, especially when I was coming out, you go from making like 10 bucks, 14, 15 bucks per hour to making over 60. When I was making 65, it's probably not the same way anymore, but that's quite a bit. And a lot of my friends were like buying really, really fancy cars. They're splurging quite a bit, you know, and they weren't investing their money. And so that's why for me, it was always really, really important to keep my expenses down as much as possible. I had roommates, I did all this stuff. I just lived very, very frugally. Even when I didn't have that many liabilities, it was hard for me to leave. Imagine how hard it was to leave if you have a house payment, you have all these liabilities and stuff too. Let's talk about con number 2, job growth. So if you're watching this video, it's probably no surprise to you. Of all the healthcare careers, pharmacy is the slowest one. If I check BLS right now, it's a little bit better than before because it used to be in negatives, but now it's like 3%, and that's relatively slow. When you compare it to PAs and all that, those are really fast-growing industries. It's not only that, but in terms of traditional pharmacy, the profit margins are really, really bad. And you're like, okay, I'm not a business owner. Why should I even care about this? Like, it doesn't bother me. I'm not a business owner. I don't plan on opening up my pharmacy. But if we look at things like tech in the back in the day and our friends that work at Google and stuff, before they started doing all the cuts, it was such a lavish lifestyle. There was so much waste. They would pay for your lunch. They would comp all these things. They would have these like sleep nap rooms and stuff. From what I heard, all the luxuries of like the tech world were happening because there was such high profit margins. Now let's go back to pharmacy. When I was trying to roll up pharmacies, meaning when I was looking at buying up pharmacies, putting them together, selling them to the chains, I was looking at the profit margins, the P&Ls, and they were horrible. They were under 20%. They were declining 1 to 2% every single year. And what happens? It's kind of like our college days when we're broke. Every single dollar matters. We're in like business development mode. We're scrambling. We're penny pinching. And this is what's happening to a lot of the pharmacies that are happening right now. And a huge reason, not to blame everything on them, but the PBMs and insurance companies have a huge part to do with it. They have clawbacks. They have DIR fees, unless things have changed, but it almost seems to a point where it's predatory. I mean, not a lot of people know this if they don't look at the business, like if they don't look at the numbers. But seriously, what industry could you like lose money doing work, right? And it happens in pharmacy all the time, where some medications you can lose money dispensing out a medication. Then, in my opinion, that's freaking ridiculous. How people get around that is like, well, if the average of all these medications is a lot higher and I'm profiting, that's okay. So we'll take it as like a loss leader, just like how you see these discounted like sale items and stuff like that to get you inside the store. But still, isn't it quite ridiculous to do that? And these practices don't really benefit the patients too much either, because I do know smaller business owners who actually turn down their patients and stuff too, and they don't get their medications because of this. So just be aware, job growth isn't that great for pharmacy, and it's fluctuating. It's getting a little bit better, but it's still not as fast as other careers. And it's also like a dying business model too. So that's something to be super aware about. Number 3, emotional toll. I do realize that everyone has their own way of dealing with stress. Some people do it with it better than others, but it's hard to deny that there's a growing unaliving rate for pharmacists. And I actually had to deal with this firsthand, where my supervisor actually unalived himself one day. He did not come to work. It could have been pharmacy, it could have been a lot of the other things, but work is such a huge part of our life, where it takes anywhere from 40 to plus hours of our week every single week. Personally, I believe that work has a huge impact on your like mental health and stuff. And when I was a pharmacist, like dealing with the patients, not always in a bad way, right? But dealing with the demands of patients sometimes under tight deadlines, dealing with asshole bosses, stressful staff, staff that is stressed out, and even patients dying can get very, very like overwhelming. At least for me, like, cause I would see these patients for a few years, and they would pass away, and it's like really, really sad. Their families would come in and would just thank me for making their wife's life a lot better near the end of their life. Sometimes you just get a bit attached, or sometimes there's just like dealing with asshole bosses or a stressful environment where you're constantly running around, feeling like you don't have enough resources. It takes a toll on you, where I had my days where I sat outside my car and I was like 10 minutes before work, and I was like, I don't want to go in. Or my friends would call me after work and they'd be bawling their eyes out because someone was just such an asshole to them. And I don't think that's a good way to go about work. Like, I know some people would be like, oh, work is work. You don't always have to like work. And I don't think that's a good way to approach life. I don't think that's a good way to approach work, because yes, you're right. There's days that you don't want to do certain things, but what happens if you have more bad days than good days? Over time, if you don't have a vision, you start building resentment toward yourself. That's when you start becoming like really, really jaded. And what a lot of people don't realize with pharmacy is that there's a lot of invisible labor that goes behind the scenes. from the patient's end, they just come and they just get these bottles of pills. But what they don't see are the behind the scenes, like medication reconciliation, helping physicians with like alternatives, talking to insurance companies, submitting PAs, talking like your profit loss statements with your like supervisor, dealing with your asshole supervisor boss who wants you to come in all the time, or like is passive aggressive about you, the bureaucracy of corporate dynamics, inventory management, and oh yeah, making sure medications don't kill your patients too, the most important one. But oftentimes people like have this misconception of us being just pill dispensers half the time because that's what they see, but they don't see what goes on behind here a lot of time too. And when I was in this stage, I just started feeling like very resentful of my job, and it wasn't fulfilling anymore. And this was the start of going through burnout, because dealing with the difficult customers, the bureaucracy, the limitations of the business model, like it not only affected my job like satisfaction of like I started having more bad days than good days, but I started at one point actually like hating my life. I was so dissatisfied, I was becoming a negative person, and I would look at the pharmacists who had 10 years, 20 years ahead of me. They would come in with their lunch bag, eat their lunch, and they'd look so defeated. And I didn't want to be like that. And I also didn't want to be like my asshole bosses, right? Not all of them were assholes, by the way. Some of them were really, really kind and awesome. And that's a hard thing too. Like, it's you build this identity of being a pharmacist. People have this prestige with you being a pharmacist, even though you're not a medical doctor or some of these other professions. People still associate you with like some sort of prestige and professionalism. And when I eventually quit, I dealt with a lot of self-worth issues. I dealt with a lot of internal struggles. It just made it so hard to leave, because when I left my job, I was like, who am I? You know, who am I without this career? You know? And that was really, really tough. The last con, it impacts your personal life. So, especially when I was working in community, sometimes you can make it work. Sometimes this kind of goes both ways, but sometimes you get some really odd hours, and it makes it really challenging to, especially if you're a newer pharmacist and you're doing like overnight and all that. I remember I would feel left out a lot of times because I had to drive so far away, and like it'd be really, really tough to meet people for dinner, like when friend gatherings, or like it would be really, really tough because I was working, where I wanted to see my family for Thanksgiving back home, but it was so tough because they're halfway across the country. And I'm not gonna blame it on pharmacy, because it's not pharmacy's fault, right? It was actually like my fault for not prioritizing it enough. But the environment that I was in did not make it any better. This resentment too of not being able to live the life that I really wanted to. Honestly, I hate to say it, but it bled into my relationships too. So much of my negativity, my negative energy came out complaining about it all the time, and it was really, really hard. The stressful work and long hours and stuff made it really, really tough on my ex. And sometimes I would like lash out. I'm not proud of these moments and stuff, but I would lash out. I would just be in a mood. I would just feel so burnt out over time, and didn't want to do anything on my off days. And my ex was the type of person who really loved to go out. She used to love like adventures and stuff, but I'd be such a buzzkill, and that wasn't really in my DNA. And like, because I'm surprisingly, I'm actually a pretty spontaneous person. We almost finished this bowl. This was so delicious. Peace, Dad. This wasn't meant to be an exhaustive list of everything. It was just to give you some highlights about some things that I've been thinking about. So let me know, what are some of your pros and cons of pharmacy in the comments below. If you want to see me do more pros and cons type of stuff, keep on following. I do a lot of full guides on creative businesses, self-actualization, and lifestyle design too. One of my goals is really to help people like myself who are in pharmacy escape it and just build a life that they love. Because the truth is, if you're like me, you're really not alone. And I'll talk to you later, guys. Take care. Peace.